Somewhere beneath the sands off the coast of Massachusetts lies a ship that once carried one of the greatest fortunes ever assembled in the Atlantic world. Hundreds of millions of dollars in gold, silver, and coins may still be buried inside her today. Divers have spent decades searching. Historians have spent decades arguing. And still, most of what she carried has never been found. But the real mystery isn't just the treasure, it's the ship herself, and why no vessel like her has ever been found again. And the deeper archaeologists dig into her remains, the stranger her story becomes. This isn't just the story of a pirate captain, it's the story of a single ship, the Whydah Gally, the only fully authenticated pirate shipwreck ever discovered from the golden age of piracy. Built for one brutal purpose, seized for another, and swallowed by the ocean in a single night, she's still giving up secrets more than 3 centuries later. Some confirm the legend, some rewrite it completely. So let's start where her story actually begins, not with the pirates, but with the ship itself. In 1760, in the shipyards of London, a vessel was constructed that, on paper, looked like nothing special. She was a galley, a hybrid design built to sail under both wind and oar power when needed, and she was engineered for one specific, horrifying purpose. The Whydah Gally was built to serve the triangle trade, the transatlantic system that moved manufactured goods from Europe to the West African coast, forced captives from Africa to the Americas, and colonial exports like sugar and gold dust back to Europe. Ships built for this trade needed to be fast, seaworthy, and large enough to carry substantial cargo across 3 legs of ocean, and the Whydah was purpose-built to do exactly that. She measured around 100 feet in length, a genuinely large vessel for her era, and she carried 18 cannons, enough firepower to defend herself against most threats she might encounter on the open Atlantic. She was fast for her size, fast enough that few merchant ships could outrun her, and few naval vessels could easily catch her. In the world of 18th century shipbuilding, she represented something close to the cutting edge, a vessel designed to move enormous value across the ocean as efficiently and safely as possible. Her name came from the West African port of Whydah in what is now Benin, a major hub of the slave trade at the time. And it was there, and at ports like it, that she took on her human cargo before beginning the brutal Middle Passage across the Atlantic. Below her main deck, the space that would later hold pirate plunder had originally been fitted out for an entirely different, far darker purpose: cramped holds designed to pack in as many captive human beings as the hull could physically contain. She completed at least one full triangle trade voyage before the events that would define the rest of her existence, sailing to the Caribbean, offloading captives, taking on sugar, indigo, and other colonial goods, and turning back toward England loaded with the profits of that horrific exchange. Ships of her class rarely survived long enough to become famous. Most simply completed their brutal circuit for a decade or 2 before being scrapped, sold, or lost to storms and disease outbreaks aboard. The Whydah was different only because her very first return voyage put her directly in the path of men who recognized exactly what she was worth, not as a trading vessel, but as a weapon. She was, in early 1707, sailing home to London along a stretch of ocean near the Bahamas when her fate changed forever. Waiting in those waters was a pirate fleet under the command of a captain named Samuel Bellamy, a former sailor with a reputation for avoiding unnecessary bloodshed, and a growing following of men who had thrown in with him after he turned pirate rather than continue working for wages that left them permanently poor. Bellamy had spent months building a small fleet through captured vessels, but none of them matched what the Whydah represented. She was faster than anything the Royal Navy could easily send after her, strong enough to fight if it came to that, and large enough to carry more plunder than any ship Bellamy had commanded before. The encounter, when it came, ended quickly. Facing Bellamy's guns and a crew that outnumbered her own, the Whydah's captain surrendered without a prolonged fight. Bellamy handed over his previous ship as a parting gift and claimed the Whydah as his new flagship. And in that single exchange, a vessel built for the machinery of the slave trade became the fastest, most valuable pirate ship in the Atlantic. She had been built to move captives and profit for a trading company. She was about to become something else entirely. Under Bellamy's command, the Whydah stopped being a single ship and became the center of something closer to a small, mobile empire. Over the following months, Bellamy's growing fleet, with the Whydah at its head, is believed to have captured more than 50 vessels across the Caribbean and the Atlantic trade routes, an almost unbelievable number for a single pirate campaign operating over such a short window of time. Every captured ship added to a growing hoard stowed inside her hold. Gold coins from Spanish and Portuguese trade routes, silver ingots pulled from merchant vessels, sacks of gold dust, some of it originating from West African trade networks and prized for its purity. Ivory, sugar, fine cloth, and manufactured goods meant for colonial markets, weapons, ammunition, and navigational instruments taken from captured crews, jewelry stripped from wealthy passengers unlucky enough to be aboard the wrong ship at the wrong time. Historians estimate that by the time her final voyage began, the Whydah may have been carrying somewhere in the range of 4.5 tons of treasure, though the exact totals will likely never be confirmed with certainty. Below decks, she had transformed into something closer to a floating vault than a warship. Barrels of coin sat stacked beside crates of West African gold dust. Chests of jewelry, stripped from the cabins of merchant passengers, were wedged between sacks of sugar and bolts of fine cloth. Cannons had to be repositioned just to make room for the sheer volume of plunder pouring in from every captured vessel. The same holds that had once been fitted for human suffering under the flag of a trading company were now packed, floor to ceiling, with more wealth than most of her crew could ever have imagined, earning honestly in a lifetime of ordinary sailing. She was, by the spring of 1717, arguably the single wealthiest ship afloat anywhere in the Atlantic world, pirate or otherwise. She carried roughly 146 men, drawn from a dozen different nations and backgrounds. Former captives who had once been forced laborers on slave ships stood shoulder to shoulder with runaway sailors from the Royal Navy, Dutch traders, and men who had simply run out of other options in a world that offered very few of them a path out of poverty. It was, in its own strange way, one of the most genuinely diverse crews sailing under any flag at the time, all of them bound together aboard the same ship, chasing the same impossible dream of escaping poverty forever. In an era when naval and merchant vessels enforced rigid hierarchies based on nationality, class, and often race, life aboard the Whydah operated under a very different arrangement, one where a share of the plunder and a vote in major decisions belonged to nearly every man on the ship, regardless of where he had come from. By the spring of 1717, Bellamy turned the Whydah north, away from the plunder routes of the Caribbean and toward New England, carrying more wealth in her hold than most noblemen of the era would see in a lifetime. Her crew, flush with success and confident in her speed, had little reason to expect disaster. She had outrun warships. She had outfought merchant crews. She had, by almost every measure, already won. But the waters off Cape Cod in April carry a danger that no cannon can fight back against. As she approached the Massachusetts coastline, a powerful storm was building offshore, the kind of nor'easter that sailors of that era both feared and underestimated in equal measure. Some accounts suggest warning signs were visible in the sky and the shifting wind well before the worst of it arrived. Whether those signs were ignored out of overconfidence, exhaustion, or simple bad luck is something historians still debate. What isn't in question is what happened next. On the night of April 26, 1717, the storm broke over her with full force. Waves that sailors later described as some of the worst they had ever encountered began slamming into her hull. The wind tore at her sails faster than the crew could adjust them. Visibility collapsed into near-total darkness, broken only by flashes of lightning revealing walls of black water rising on every side. For a ship that had outrun warships and outfought merchant crews across 100 engagements, the sea itself was proving to be the one opponent her speed and her cannons couldn't answer. She was pushed dangerously close to the shallow sandbars that line the coast near what is now Wellfleet, Massachusetts, a stretch of water that has claimed more ships than almost any other part of the New England coastline. In the chaos, her heavy cannons broke loose from their mountings, crashing across the deck with enough force to crush anyone in their path. Her structural integrity, already strained by the storm, began to fail under the combined pressure of the waves and the shifting weight of her own cargo, a hold packed so densely with treasure that it may have made her less stable in exactly the conditions where stability mattered most. Then, sometime in the early hours of the morning, she struck the sandbar and began to break apart. Survivors later described the ship splitting in the darkness, her hull tearing under stress she was never built to withstand. Her mainmast came down across the deck. Timbers that had held together through months of raids and battles finally gave way under the combined weight of the storm and a hold packed far beyond its intended capacity. Men were thrown into freezing, violent water in the middle of a raging storm, some of them weighed down by the very treasure they had spent months collecting, the same fortune that was supposed to buy them a new life becoming, for many of them, the weight that pulled them under. Of the roughly 146 people aboard that night, only 2 are widely accepted by historians as having survived. In a matter of hours, the wealthiest pirate ship in the Atlantic, along with almost every man who had helped build her fortune, disappeared beneath the waves. In the days following the wreck, local residents reportedly found debris and bodies washed along the shoreline, remnants of a disaster that must have seemed almost unbelievable in scale. But the ship herself, along with the overwhelming majority of her treasure, vanished beneath the surf. Cape Cod's coastline is notorious among sailors and archaeologists alike for its shifting sandbars, powered by relentless currents that constantly rearrange the sea floor. Within a remarkably short time, her wreck was buried under layers of sand, effectively erased from the surface world. Colonial authorities attempted early salvage efforts, but with limited technology and a coastline that refused to stay still, those efforts largely failed. Over the following decades, and eventually centuries, she slipped from historical record into local legend. Stories of her lost treasure became part of Cape Cod folklore, the kind of tale parents told children and treasure hunters told each other in taverns, each version growing a little more exaggerated than the last. Some treated it as fact, many dismissed it as myth. Treasure hunters occasionally combed the beaches near Wellfleet, drawn by rumors passed down through generations of local families, and some claimed to have found scattered coins washed up after storms, small confirmations that kept the legend alive, even as the wreck itself remained hidden. But without modern surveying technology, and without a reliable way to search beneath a sea floor that rearranged itself with every major storm, any organized recovery effort was effectively impossible. For more than 250 years, the location of one of history's richest shipwrecks had simply disappeared, reduced to little more than a name in old sea charts and a story passed down at the edges of a shoreline that refused to give her up. That changed because of one man's obsession with a story most people had written off as legend. Barry Clifford grew up hearing tales of the Whydah from his own family, stories passed down through generations of Cape Cod residents. Unlike most who heard those stories and moved on, Clifford spent years researching old maps, colonial shipping records, and historical accounts, trying to narrow down exactly where a 3-century-old wreck might be hiding beneath an ever-shifting sea floor. It was painstaking, expensive, and by most outside assessments a long shot. Wrecks off Cape Cod had a habit of staying lost. But Clifford believed the historical record contained enough clues to actually find her, if someone was patient enough to follow them. In 1984, after years of searching, Clifford's team located wreckage buried beneath the sand off the coast of Wellfleet. Early finds suggested they had found something significant: cannons, colonial-era debris, artifacts consistent with an early 18th century vessel. But early finds alone couldn't prove which ship this actually was. The Atlantic coastline holds the remains of hundreds of wrecks from that era, and a scattered field of cannons and iron fittings could plausibly belong to any number of them. Then, during the excavation, divers recovered a small, corroded brass bell from the wreckage. When conservators carefully cleaned away centuries of marine growth and corrosion, an inscription slowly became visible on its surface: the Whydah Gally, 1716. It was, in the world of maritime archaeology, as close to definitive proof as anyone could ask for. Ships' bells were typically inscribed with a vessel's name, and often its year of construction, and this one matched her origins almost perfectly. For the first time in more than 2.5 centuries, historians and archaeologists could say with confidence that the wreck of the Whydah Gally had finally been found. What followed was one of the most significant maritime archaeological projects in American history. Over the decades since that initial discovery, more than 200,000 artifacts have been recovered from her wreck site, an almost overwhelming volume of physical history pulled directly from the seafloor. Gold and silver coins from Spanish, Portuguese, and other colonial mints. Fragments of gold dust believed to originate from West African trade networks. Jewelry, buckles, and personal ornaments that once belonged to crew members whose names have mostly been lost to history. Pistols, cannons, and cannonballs, preserved in remarkable condition thanks to the anaerobic, low-oxygen conditions of the burial site. Fragments of clothing and leather, navigational instruments used to chart her course, and personal belongings that offer small, intimate glimpses into the lives of the men who sailed her. Perhaps most strikingly, archaeologists also recovered shackles from her wreck, grim physical evidence of her earlier life as a vessel in the slave trade, a reminder that her story cannot be separated from the darker economic system that built her in the first place. These artifacts have allowed historians to study something far more complex than a simple pirate legend. They reveal a snapshot of global trade, forced labor, and the diverse multinational makeup of pirate crews during the golden age of piracy, all preserved inside a single hull. In a strange way, the wreck functions almost like a time capsule of the entire Atlantic economic system of the early 1700s, condensed into one buried ship. Colonial trade goods, African gold, European weaponry, and the physical instruments of slavery, all sitting within a few hundred feet of each other on the seafloor. Some research into her recovered gold has suggested that certain samples, believed to be Akan gold from West Africa, show exceptionally high purity levels, offering a physical connection to specific trade networks operating along the African coast at the time. Conservators have spent decades working through the backlog of finds, a process almost as painstaking as the excavation itself. Objects pulled from the seafloor after nearly 3 centuries underwater are rarely in a condition to simply be cleaned and displayed. Coins fuse together into solid concretions that require careful separation. Iron artifacts corrode into shapes barely recognizable until X-ray imaging reveals the object hidden inside the rust. Some concretions, when finally opened in a lab, have turned out to contain dozens of coins, fused together with fabric, wood, or other organic material, tiny frozen snapshots of exactly how those objects came to rest the moment she went down. And yet, for everything that has been recovered, researchers keep returning to the same unsettling question. If 200,000 artifacts have already come up from around her hull, how much more is still down there? Despite decades of excavation, most archaeologists and researchers involved with the site believe that a significant portion of her original treasure has still not been recovered. The reason comes back to the same coastline that swallowed her in the first place. The sands off Wellfleet are constantly shifting, driven by powerful ocean currents that rearrange the seafloor on an ongoing basis. Areas that are exposed and accessible one season can be buried under meters of sand the next, only to potentially shift again years later. This makes systematic excavation incredibly difficult, expensive, and slow, requiring specialized equipment and favorable conditions that don't always align with research budgets or timelines. Divers working the site describe conditions that shift dramatically from one visit to the next, an area fully mapped and excavated in one season, sometimes buried under fresh sand within a matter of months, forcing teams to essentially restart their search in the exact same spot. Some estimates, often cited in popular reporting, suggest that the treasure still buried around her could be worth hundreds of millions of dollars in modern value, though it's important to treat these figures as informed estimates rather than confirmed totals. There is also a darker possibility that researchers rarely discuss in public interviews but privately acknowledge as a real risk. Every storm that might expose new treasure could just as easily scatter it beyond recovery, breaking apart concentrations of coins and dust that have stayed intact for centuries, spreading them across a wider stretch of sea floor where they may never be gathered again. The same ocean that hid her fortune for over 250 years could, just as easily, be quietly destroying the parts still waiting to be found. What makes the Whydah Gally truly extraordinary isn't just the treasure, or the storm, or even the pirate captain who once commanded her. It's the fact that, to this day, she remains the only fully authenticated pirate shipwreck from the golden age of piracy ever discovered and confirmed with physical evidence. Every other pirate ship from that era exists only in written records, legend, or speculation. She exists in the form of 200,000 physical objects, a corroded brass bell, and a documented excavation history spanning decades. That distinction has made her one of the most important sites in maritime archaeology, reshaping how historians understand pirate life, correcting long-held myths, and revealing the genuine diversity of nationalities and backgrounds among Golden Age pirate crews. Recovered artifacts from her wreck are now on public display at the Whydah Pirate Museum in West Yarmouth, Massachusetts, allowing visitors to stand inches away from objects that were once buried beneath the Atlantic inside her hull. Coins that once passed through the hands of merchants, captives, and pirates now sit under museum lighting, silent witnesses to one of the most violent and profitable centuries in maritime history. For a long time, popular culture painted pirate ships as fairly uniform vessels, crewed by a fairly uniform kind of man. Her crew manifest and recovered artifacts tell a very different story, one of genuine diversity, of former captives who became free men under a pirate flag, of sailors from multiple continents sharing equal footing aboard a single hull. In that sense, her wreck has done more than confirm a legend. It has been corrected. There is a strange symmetry to her existence that few other ships in history can claim. She was built for one of the most exploitative systems ever devised, seized and repurposed by men trying to escape exploitation of their own, and ultimately destroyed while carrying more wealth than she was ever designed to hold. Every phase of her short life, barely a year from her capture to her sinking, left a physical trace that archaeologists are still piecing together 3 centuries later. Few vessels in maritime history have had their entire story, beginning, transformation, and end, so thoroughly reconstructed from artifacts alone. And the excavation isn't finished. Researchers continue working her site year after year, chasing a fortune that may still be sitting beneath the sand, waiting for the ocean to give it up. Each season begins with the same open question that has driven this search since 1984. What will the shifting sand around her finally decide to release next? More than 3 centuries after she went down, the Whydah Gally is still writing her own story. One artifact, one storm, one shifting sandbar at a time.